team, I hope you're all well. As you can tell from the title of this video, I am going to be telling you about my best books of 2021 today. I am excited about doing this. This was not easy. I have been using G from Book Roast's core pile system. If you don't know what that is, I will leave a link to her announcement video down below for core pile and any subsequent videos she's done since. But basically core pile is a spreadsheet that G has set up to help people rate their books a bit better and stuff if they want to, if they need the assist, which generally it has really worked out well for me this year. This is the first time that I've done it for the whole year. It's worked out really well. I've been able to keep a catalogue of my books a lot easier of what I've read and exactly what I've rated it, and it's made this process a little bit easier. Not much, but a little bit easier. I have read a good ton of books this year. When I'm filming this, I'm filming it on New Year's Eve, so Thursday the 30th, and I haven't yet finished my reading for the year. So I am at 198 books for the year at this moment in time. I reckon I'm going to finish on 200 or 201 books for the year. So we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, that's where I'm at the moment. And I have compiled, I don't anticipate the last couple of books that I read being in my top 10. So I'm filming this now because I can and I need to. But I do have my top 10 here, and this was not an easy process. Most of this is fantasy, a couple romances, there is a middle grade in here, and it was not an easy process. There was a clear number one, which obviously I will get to at the end of this video because we're going to count down from 10. But from books 2 through till book 10, all of these ended up coming out as a 9.57 on core pile, which is a 5-star. But my number one book came out as a 9.71, which I think is like the highest you can get aside from a 10. So they came out as incredibly high, and it was really hard to decide what came where in this, you know, 2 to 10 position. So I think I would say the top 5 are solid. I would say the last 5 could be a little bit fluid and could move about a little bit. So just take my latter 5 as with a pinch of salt. They could move about within the latter 5, but my top 5 are pretty solid. My top 3 definitely are, but my top 5 are pretty solid, I think. So without further ado, let's get into it. And at number 10, I have put Me, My Dad and the End of the Rainbow by Benjamin Dean. This is a queer middle grade, and this is absolutely adorable. I really loved this book. It was so good. This was one of the middle grade monthly book club picks for earlier on in the year, and I really enjoyed it. This book follows Archie, and he's fairly certain that his mum and dad are keeping secrets from him. They have been arguing a lot. He's fairly certain that they hate each other, and they've got a big secret between the two of them. All he wants is for his family to be happy. However, one day he hears his dad's secret and everything is completely blown out of proportion. He finds a flyer from his dad's pocket that is advertising Pride in London, and he wants to go, and he goes on an adventure with his 2 friends to go to Pride Day in London, the celebrations and stuff, and he wants to find out what it's all about so that he can try and understand his dad a little bit more. And it's very wholesome, it's beautifully written, very well done. I think perfect for the age group that it's aimed at, but also perfect for adults as well. And the illustrations in here are just adorable as well. There's not many of them, but they are adorable. And I really did enjoy this one. It was good. I just had such a good time with it. It was very, very cute indeed. So I would recommend this one, and it did get 5 stars from me. Obviously, it got a 9.57 on core pile, and I would highly recommend it. And I also love this underneath the cover as well. So yeah, I really, really love this one. 5 stars from me. It was my number 10 book. In number 9, we have Vicious by V.E. Schwab. I really love this book. I finished this duology this year. It's probably one of the very few duologies I've actually ever finished. I really need to get better at that one, but I really love this one. This is a sci-fi fantasy book that is it's kind of dark, but it's also following some morally grey characters as well. We're following Eli and Victor, who go to uni together. We follow them during 2 different timelines, across 2 different timelines. So we follow them in the present, and then we follow them 10 years ago when they were at uni together and best friends. And in the present day, they are no longer friends. They are enemies. And essentially, when they're at uni, they would like to figure out how extraordinaries become extraordinaries. Now, extraordinaries are people with abilities. So they try and figure out how people have done this. They're wanting to do a thesis on it at uni, and they figure it out, and then they try and test this theory themselves. Now, the theory is that these people have had near-death experiences, most likely have actually died and then been revived. So both Eli and Victor test these theories out, and they then end up with extraordinary abilities. Something goes down 10 years later. We then skip time. 10 years later, Victor is coming out of prison. Yeah, escaped prison, and is determined to get his revenge on the man who put him there, aided by a young girl and also one of his prison mates as well. So it's very good. I adore these characters. I love Victor. He is amazing. He's like one of the best morally grey characters I've ever read. Similarly with Eli, and I just loved this series. I did give the whole series 5 stars, but this was my favourite out of the 2 of them. This is a duology to start off with, but there is going to be a 3rd one coming out. I've no idea when. I got to the end of Vengeful and then immediately wanted to pick the 3rd one up, but God knows when it's coming out because Vengeful has been out a while already. So this is going to be a trilogy. I don't know why I mentioned that it was a duology before, because it was meant to be a duology and then she changed her mind. So it is going to be a trilogy, but yeah, loved this one. I gave it 5 stars. Obviously it came in my top 10. So book number 9. Then in number 8, we have The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. This is probably still my most surprising book of the year. I honestly thought I was going to hate this. It's a political fantasy with war involved, and I thought I was going to hate that. First of all, I don't like politics. Second of all, not a fan of war either. Not that anybody is particularly a fan of war, but I don't tend to read war stories. So I thought I was going to hate this, and honestly, I was so... I wouldn't say pleasantly surprised, but I was incredibly surprised at how much I loved this. This was fantastic. We're following Rin, who is a young girl, and she aces the Keiju, which is the test to find the most talented students in the Nikara Empire, which was a shock to everybody. And then she ended up in the Singe Guard, which is the most elite military school in Nikan, and that was even more surprising to everybody because they didn't expect her to. However, it turns out that this is not going to be easy at the school, and it turns out that Rin actually possesses a magical power of shamanism, and exploring her gift with the help of a seemingly insane teacher, Rin learns that gods, long thought dead, are very much alive, and that mastering these powers could mean more than just surviving school. And then obviously war happens, so we do have like some school training, and then she goes off to war. This is incredibly dark, incredibly grim. There is a scene partway through here, probably actually maybe a little bit further, probably like around this part, of very brutal murder and a rape scene as well, so do be wary of that going in. Trigger warnings for that, and obviously trigger warnings for war, etc. But I loved this. 5 stars. I was so incredibly surprised. I was absolutely blown away. I have not yet continued on with the series, despite the fact that I do own the books, but it is my aim to hopefully finish the series in 2022. So yeah, 5 stars for this one. Book number 7 is the 3rd in a series. You will see books 1 and 2 in this pile as well, and that is the 3rd in the Greatcoat series, Saint's Blood by Sebastian de Castell. So this series follows 3 of the men from the Greatcoats. The Greatcoats were a group of magistrates that basically worked for the king, but he has now died. And we're following Falcio, Kest and Brasti, and essentially at the beginning of this series, we follow them following the death of the king. They are now just bodyguards for elite people, and we follow them kind of finding themselves in a little bit of trouble. And before the king died, they were kind of each given a bit of a mission that they had to complete, and that what they're trying to do is just survive and also get the greatcoats back together and try and complete their missions. And it's very, very good. Grim dark as hell, really grim dark as you get further into the series. The second one is incredibly grim. This one is also very grim, but hilarious at the same time, just so funny. The comedy that Sebastian writes into these characters is epic. It's so good, and the way that he has the characters speak to you as a reader as well. Falkio will regularly speak to us as a reader. Just outstanding. Absolutely loved it. Lots of fighting in here. The fight scenes are really good, very well written. Really love this series, and this is the third in the Greatcoat series, and I would highly recommend this series. This is my favourite series of the year, and it is Jade's favourite series of all time, so I would highly recommend it. So yeah, Saint's Blood ended up getting position 7. Are we on book 7? Yeah. Getting position 7 from me. Book 6 is At Your Age, Eve Brown by Talia Hibbert, and I absolutely love this one. This is the third and final book in the Brown Sisters series. I love the Brown Sisters series. I think Dani Brown is still my favourite sister, which is the middle series, because I love Zaf as well, who is her love interest. But in this one we're following Eve Brown, and we're also following Jacob as well, who is the love interest. Eve essentially has been cut off from her family. She keeps changing her mind on what she wants to do. She can't settle down on anything. She's the youngest sister out of the 3, and she just cannot settle, and her mum and dad are sick of it. So they've cut her from a trust fund. They've told her she needs to go and get a job, and if she can survive for a year out on her own, they will give her her trust fund back. So out she goes in a huff on a mission to go and find a job. She ends up coming across a restaurant, like a B&B, and basically he's looking, Jacob is the owner of the B&B, and he's looking for a cook. So she ends up applying for the job. Not a great deal of experience, but she ends up applying for the job. The interview goes as a disaster, and then when she's reversing out of the car park later on, basically she runs over Jacob, breaking his arm, and he then needs some help. So she ends up staying and helping him out, and romance ensues. It's incredibly good. I really enjoyed this one. The autism rep in here is fantastic. Not an Own Voices review by any means. Please do go and seek some Own Voices reviews out on that, but I thought it was really well done, very nicely done. And the sex scenes in here, the smut, outstanding, so good. Really love this one. Would highly recommend the whole series, but this one was really good. A great end to the series, and I can't wait to see what Talia Hibbert does next. She is doing a secondary spin-off series from this one, but following Jacob's best friend, whose name I cannot remember, but we're going to be following him and his 2 sisters, I think, who feature in this book very heavily. So I would recommend this series. Also, this is the beautiful Illumicrate hardback of Eve Brown, and I'm obsessed with it, so would recommend. Book number 5 is another romance, and it is You and Me on Vacation by Emily Henry. I absolutely adored Emily Henry's other book. I say that as if she's only done one other book. I absolutely adored Beach Read by Emily Henry last year, so I knew I wanted to pick this one up, and boy did I love this book. I could relate to this on so many different levels. I have a very similar situation going on myself at the moment, but basically this is following 2 best friends who are called Poppy and Alex. 12 years ago they met at uni, and ever since then they've spent every single year going on holiday together. Hated each other to start off with, and are pretty confident that they'll never speak to each other again. And then 11 summers ago they're forced to share a ride home from college, and by the end of it a pact is formed every year, one vacation together. And so the vacations go on and on until 2 summers ago things kind of go a little bit wrong, and then this summer Poppy asks Alex if he'll spend one last vacation with her, and it all kind of goes from there. I absolutely loved this one. It was so good. The banter between Poppy and Alex, I lived for it. The smut in here was fantastic. The relationship between the pair of them, both romantically and friendship wise, was just outstanding, and I just related to this a whole lot. When I read it, it was the perfect time for me to read this, and I think this is why it's ended up making it to my top 10. I think otherwise, had I not read it when I did, it may not have done. I may not have resonated with it as much, but I really did resonate with this book. It's fantastic. Absolutely loved it. Would recommend. 5 stars, obviously. It's in my top 10. Number 4 is the first in the Greatcoat series, which is Traitor's Blade. I have just told you about this series. Absolutely loved this book. Such a good start to the series. Highly recommend. I've already told you about it. Go read the series. It's fantastic. We're in the top 3 now, team. And in 3rd place, we have The Nature of Witches by Rachel Griffin. I absolutely loved this book. Look at how much I tabbed it up. I adored it. I honestly thought this was going to rival the first book. Like, number 1. I thought this was going to rival number 1, but I've had time. This is what happens. I sit down, I reflect on it, especially when I was putting this pile together. I reflected on how the books have made me feel since then, and which ones have stuck with me, which ones are still, you know, living rent free in my head. This does, just not as much as I thought it would when I was reading it. I absolutely loved it when I read it. It was fantastic, and I think I will love it upon reread, but it's just not one that, you know, I think will rival number 1 or 2 in this list, which you'll find out about in a second. So basically, for centuries, witches have helped Earth control their climate and stuff, and keep things kind of, you know, neat, and make sure that we don't end up in the trouble that we're currently in with the climate. And we end up following our main character, Clara, who wants nothing to do with her powers. She is an Everwitch, which means that she can control all of the seasons, whereas normally a witch can just control one season, and then they're pretty low the rest of the year. They don't have a great deal of magic. However, Clara can control all of the seasons, all of the year, so she's constantly switched on. She's constantly got magic, but she wants nothing to do with it. She doesn't want any part of it at all, and she keeps trying to stick her head in the sand. But the school that she's at having none of it, and it turns out that the climate is struggling, and so are the witches, and they really need her help. This was incredibly beautiful. I loved the writing style. It was fantastic. I'm very excited to see what Rachel comes out with next. She's got a new release on its way next year, and I'm so hyped. Next year, 2022, when this video goes up, it'll be 2022 this year, and I'm very excited for it. I just loved this so much. I felt like Clara was a little bit whiny, but I just really loved her character development. And I loved the other characters in the book in here as well. And I loved what it represented as well, as far as the climate's concerned. And the idea that witches could use magic to help us help control the climate and the environment. And, you know, help make the world a better place, seeing as we've ruined it as humans. So I just really loved this one. It was fantastic. I would recommend. Absolutely loved it. It is in my top 3. I adored it so much. Also, one of the prettiest books I own. Literally one of the prettiest books I own, both the dust jacket on and off. So yeah, loved this one, would highly recommend. In second place, I don't know if any of you are going to be expecting this or not, but in second place we have It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. I was not expecting to see this on this list at all when I picked it up, but by God, has this book stuck with me. I've not been able to stop thinking about it, and I kind of already want to reread it. This book destroyed me. I cried my eyes out throughout several areas in this book. It was phenomenal, and I've not been able to stop thinking about it. It's so good. This is the second Colleen Hoover book that I've picked up this year, the other one being Verity, which I just would like to make a quick mention to. Also fantastic. Very dark, do be careful, many trigger warnings. But this one follows Lily, who basically, we follow her in 2 different timelines. So we follow her when she's a young girl. I think she's about 14, 15. And then we follow her many years later. Does it say? No, it doesn't. But basically we follow her many years later. I think she's then about 26, so it's probably like 10 years later, something like that. But basically she has started up her own business. She now lives in Boston. She grew up, went to college, moved to Boston, started up her own business, and then she meets this guy called Ryle, who is assertive, stubborn, and maybe even a little arrogant. He's also sensitive, brilliant, and has total soft spot for Lily, but Ryle's complete aversion to relationships is disturbing. So Lily wants to be in a relationship, but Ryle wants nothing to do with that. He just kind of wants to, you know, he wants all the benefits without the hard work, essentially. But their relationship ensues, and we see how that unfolds. However, Lily has a past with a boy called Atlas, who, when she was younger, which is why we get the two timelines, she was seeing Atlas, who was a boy who ended up homeless. He was squatting in the house next door to hers, and she ended up helping him out. Now, her parents had a lot of trouble with abuse. Her dad was very abusive to her mother, and she used to have to deal with that on a daily basis. He was also a drunk, so be wary of physical, sexual and mental abuse in here. Also alcohol abuse. So just be wary of those things in here. The physical abuse does become quite a heavy topic later on in the book as well, so do be wary of that going in. But yeah, she ends up building this relationship up with Atlas. He is a few years older than her, so he is very wary to kind of, you know, maintain it as more of a friendship relationship until she is of age. So she must be like 15 when we first start the book. And then he disappears, and she doesn't see him again until many years later, when her relationship with Ryle has ensued and Atlas ends up coming back into her life. And it just kind of goes from there. This is incredibly hard-hitting. This is a hard-hitting contemporary with romance, and I just be careful going in. But it's fantastic. I just fucking love this book. It was so good. It completely lives rent-free in my head, and I guarantee I will be rereading this in 2022. I just loved it. It was fantastic, and I would recommend, highly recommend it. And then in first position we have the second in the Greatcoat series, which is Night Shadow by Sebastian de Castell. Is anybody surprised? I'm not sure. This got 9.71 on Corpile. I absolutely adored this. It was so good. The characters are everything in this series for me. They literally make the series. I love them so much. Sebastian really knows how to write great characters and put comedy in here, despite the grim, dark elements. In this one, there is a very, very, very dark torture scene and rape scene, so do be wary of that before you go into the series. It does get heavy in this book specifically, so do be wary of that, but I absolutely love this series. I don't know if I can tell you how much I love this series. It was so good, and I just fucking love this book. I sobbed at the end of this series as well, so just know that going in. Tyrant's Throne, which is the last book in the series, didn't make it to this list because it got 9.43 on Corpile, but you know, it would have been there in the top 15 had I done 15 books. But yeah, Night Shadow was my #1 book of the year, very closely followed by It Ends With Us. But yeah, Night Shadow won for 2021, so thanks Jade for destroying my life. I'm joking. I love this series so much, and I would highly recommend it. Obviously do be wary of the trigger warnings. But yeah, that is my top 10 of 2021. I had such a good time with these books. Had such a good time with almost all of my books, to be perfectly honest. There were only a few that let me down. I DNF'd a lot. I can't remember what I DNF'd. But yeah, I had such a good time. I loved these books. They were so good. I hope you have enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments down below if any of my top 10 made it into your top 10 of the year, or if you've read any of them and enjoyed them or hated them, or if they're now on your TBR. So yeah, chat to me in the comments down below, and I shall see you in the next one. Bye for now.